Yes, thanks, John. Hopefully you've all had your workbooks. There is a page in the workbook that covers some of the slides that we're going to be looking at today. So if you do need another copy of that, then do let us know. As John said, this webinar is looking at the business case for training and developing staff. And like any aspect of business, there should be a rationale for the spend. And what we're going to do is explore what reasons there might be for training and what information you need to include in your rationale. So we start off with every business wanting to achieve competitive advantage. So what do we mean when we actually throw this term around? Well, competitive advantage is about knowing how to make products better than your competitors. It's about being able to innovate more quickly or bring new product or services to market more quickly than your competitors. And if we think about the not-for-profit sector, then competitive advantage is still important, but it's different. It might be about rehoming more dogs and cats than competing charities. And competitive advantage is about knowing how to meet the changing needs of your clients or customers. So what's the common factor in everything I've been describing so far? Well, yeah, I guess you've guessed that one. It's people. Some firms believe people are so important that they have company universities. For example, Tarleys and Phillips, a couple of companies that have had company universities for an awful long time. Others have got internal staff training programs with really snazzy names. But we're getting a bit of ahead of ourselves here. We first need to ask the question, is it right to grow people? And if it is, what's our rationale? We need to think about what's best for the business. We need to think, is training and growing our people the best course of action? Or should we use technology to obtain that competitive advantage? And the balancing act between human competence and machine function is an interesting one. And what I want to do is look at some case studies of projects that we've been involved with and show you 3 different approaches to skills and knowledge acquisition. So in the first, Technology Maximizer, there was a decision made to implement the very best system. Coupled with that, the world was moving really fast, and there have been many changes to the core technology, and in this case, the company is involved in algorithms. And algorithms is a process or a set of rules that are followed in calculations or other problem-solving operations, and usually algorithms are performed by computer. And in this case, the regulators are the people that we're talking about here, and they're a government department. So most regulators only employ local nationals. And the competence of the operatives running the system in the regulator therefore depend on the effectiveness of the local universities and the local technical colleges. And even in a global economy, regulators are really disinclined to recruit foreign nationals unless they've got a really high level role or a difficult to fill role. Staff in this Technology Maximizer were not highly competent, and they weren't familiar with recent changes to the algorithms. And management realised that if they bought a technology solution that had all the changes codified in its software, then they could immediately jump into the capability that they wanted to be. They could move up that capability ladder. Management considered the latest systems and wanted automatic. So they'd not thought automatic was needed, but actually it was there and available, and it was the most advanced, and advanced was good, so we'll go automatic. The result was that the specified system was both advanced and automatic. And in this particular scenario, there were about 20 staff who used the existing technology, and most of them were graduates. They were well-respected civil servants, but as soon as the system was installed, their jobs were reduced to supervision of the machines. And the machines did the work, and the operatives' jobs were significantly reduced in variety, identity, importance, autonomy, and feedback. And this particular country had a moratorium on civil servants' redundancies. Civil servants couldn't be dismissed. They had to be kept on regardless of cost. So the Technology Maximizer had to think what they were going to do. And they'd actually been regular and significant participators of regional and international symposia and other cooperative meetings. And the skills needed to participate were higher than those held within the regulator, but the knowledge and skills could be learned by the operatives. So what did this technology maximizer do? They transferred its operatives from technology user into license process and license processing into international delegates. They got them to do different things at a higher level. So their jobs were then enriched. The whole thing was fueled by a national political drive to provide e-services for the customers. Customers were expected to serve themselves to the government services, a bit like the way we do when we're using the HMRC portal here in the UK. And the capital needed to make this change was about $250,000 per operative. And this calculation was done based on total capital costs divided by the number of operatives working on the service when the project started. And in this case, management got its wish to have the best technology in the region, well, at least for a short time till technology then overtook them again, and the operatives had their status and earnings improved. In the next case, Cost Minimiser, the country's regulators had been formed by a government act in 2005. In putting forward the business plan to the government ministers, management had promised to set up the organisation as quickly as possible and then, over a period of 5 years, hugely reduce the cost of the regulator for the taxpayer. And this meant that the original headcount of 80 staff had to reduce over a period of about 5 years to more like 35 staff. So about half the staff would need to be made redundant within that 5-year period. And the motivation for this investment was cost minimisation to achieve the promised budget by the year 2010. In this case, automation through technology was the expressed aim, and the algorithms were the same as in the previous case, but there had been changes. The regulators' operatives understood the algorithms well. They'd been the creators of some of the algorithms in the past, and they were able to specify core technology and the automation for the new systems. The role of the customer, the end user, was also well understood by this regulator. Once the technology was installed, the customer would be expected to serve themselves, and the algorithms would do the number crunching and serve the customers with the results. In this case, there was a well-developed dealer network throughout the country, and it was the dealers who sold products using the radio spectrum licenses procured by their customers from the regulator. And a program of education was put in place to teach the dealers how to use the technology, and then the dealers became the mediators. They were already technically competent and motivated to facilitate licensing, and it was in their interest to make sure that the licenses were secured in a smooth manner and that the right license was purchased by the end user, the customer. So practically then, customers went to dealers and they sat with the dealer to make an online application for the licenses, which negated the requirement for operatives. So over the period of the project to implement the technology, about 45 graduate and technician level operatives were made redundant. And this regulator was already an expert in international affairs and a leader in advancement of such technologies and had high skill staff in post. So they didn't actually need to train anybody else. So there weren't that many opportunities for people to train. Capital costs for the changes that this organisation made, again, same as the previous case, about $250,000 per operative. Management met its promise to get the running costs down within 5 years. They reduced the headcount, but they also had a significant one-off redundancy cost of about £2 million. In the third case, the effectiveness maximiser scenario, I mentioned to you earlier that regulators tend to employ only local nationals, and this regulator was no different. It had a department of about 20 highly skilled, highly knowledgeable and competent operatives, and they were well-educated graduates, and all the universities and colleges in this particular country were excellent. The operatives in this scenario had dual working lives. They processed licensing applications, and they also sat on international committees and attended all international symposia that they needed to go to. And of all the regulatory operatives that we've just been talking about, they had by far the greatest variety, identity, significance, and autonomy in their jobs. These guys, they were really highly motivated. The country was also really well known for its high national productivity level and high GDP. So management's motivation for replacing the technology in this case was to give their operatives the best tools they could to enable them to be even more efficient than they already were. There was no intention to cut costs and automate staff redundant or to exploit the codification of knowledge in new technology. There was no need to drive to be the best in the region because they felt they already were the best. And the algorithms specified in the core technology were the same as in the other two cases. Basically, they were common worldwide. But in this case, the regulator wanted to source a solution with lower product management specification. It wanted low automation. It had no direct customer interface, and therefore the operatives retained that mediation role. Instead, the specification was to build a tool to help customers to be knowledgeable when making license applications. Efficiency was enabled through education of the customer and by giving the operatives better tools. And in this case, no operatives were made redundant, and the capital cost per operative was only $50,000, quite a significant difference to the other two cases. And the regulator achieved a balanced effectiveness improvement program. So, 3 different ways of dealing with the problem, 3 different strategies. The cost of the technology maximizer and cost maximizer were about $250,000 per operative, whereas the cost of the effectiveness maximizer was about $50,000 per operative. The technology maximizer developed their people, they created new roles. Cost minimizer reduced the headcount and then had the associated redundancy costs. And the effectiveness maximizer gave their operatives more effective tools and they trained their customers. So in summary, 3 different responses to what effectively is the same problem for each regulator. Each had a business strategy that determined their requirement to grow their people in a different way. So, what are the drivers that make people want to grow people? There are a lot of drivers, and what I've done here is pick the drivers that I believe are the top 10 reasons. They're not the only reasons, but I think that these are the most common, and these are in your workbook. So let's whistle through all of them. So lack of capability is perhaps the most obvious reason to implement a learning intervention within a business. If your sales team's underperforming, for example, then targeted sales training may benefit them and the business. If new technology is acquired, then users will need to be trained, and we saw this in one of our earlier case studies. All organisations go through change, particularly in today's fast-evolving business world. Even if the change isn't significant, it's likely that some form of learning will be necessary in order to achieve a smooth transition. New projects often require new skills and new methods of approach, and where businesses take on major new projects, there'll often be a need for learning to support this. And the training might be about creating new capabilities or training people on new systems. If you've got real talent within your organisation, you might want to hone and develop that talent through targeted learning and development. And I've called this fast-track leaders. The right kind of learning can accelerate the development of potential future leaders once they've been identified. The more engaged your employees are, the more productive they're likely to be. By providing staff with the opportunity to learn and grow and showing them that you're genuinely supportive of their development, you create a much more engaged workforce. If you've got a specific strategic goal in mind, then perhaps winning business in a particular market or increasing your capability in a certain area, then targeted learning can help you reach these goals. Again, however, this relies on proper learning needs analysis and a strategically aligned learning and development function. Both need to be in place to make that work. If you've got employees with a clear career path and time and money are invested into their development, then they're more likely to stay with the business. Staff turnover is costly, so it's much better and more cost-effective to retain people and invest in the talent within the business and encourage your top talent to stay. There can be many reasons why a business doesn't perform as well as the senior managers want it to. And there's a good chance that increasing the effectiveness of staff will have a positive impact on the wider organisation, and learning and development can be an enabler for this. If we're looking at attracting the best talent, it's important to demonstrate an ability to offer a structured and robust development plan. This plan then needs to be shared appropriately, for example, on the company website, graduate open days, job boards, recruitment literature, wherever you need to get that out to show that you've got this system in place to manage your talent. And finally, sometimes learning and development is required for regulatory reasons. Might be health and safety compliance, might be financial compliance. Recently, GDPR, big one that we all had to look at. These are just some of the areas where one-off or regular compliance training might be needed. And the key drivers in your own business, that's going to depend on what your strategy is. This list hopefully will help you determine what you need to include in your business case when you're selling learning and development and the associated costs and benefits to your senior managers. So let's spend a few minutes thinking about the consequences of not investing in training and development. We could just list the flip side of all the drivers we've just discussed. It's likely that if you don't invest in talent, your talent will leave. It's likely that talent management is going to be something that's important to all organisations. Talent management is a business investment. Just like the investment in your tools and your technology, we need to invest in talent. If you don't train your staff, you actually stand still, or worse, slide back because your competitors are actually going to be training their staff. So think about what type of firm you want to be. Do you want to be a technology maximizer, cost minimizer, or an effectiveness maximizer, or something different? The strategy decision that you make will drive the whole ethos and the culture of the business. Every business has a decision to make, to train or not to train, and it's a real dilemma. Statistics suggest that the average length of tenure of a job is dropping. This doesn't necessarily mean that people are leaving. They could be changing jobs and staying in the same business, but the tenure in a particular job is actually reducing. The data shows that on average, over half employees aged between 25 and 34 are likely to change jobs within 5 years. Older workers are less inclined to change jobs. So what does this actually mean? Well, I think it means that you need to think that it makes sense to train people. The drivers we discussed earlier suggest that development and engagement are important, and they're improved when people are trained. You need to encourage the talented people to stay. If you don't train them, they might leave. Flip side is that if you do train them, they might leave. But there's a decision to be made. So if you elect not to train, top talent leaves, and you have an ill-trained workforce which can't deliver on the business strategy. Learning and development, talent management, they all ensure that the right people are in the right jobs, ideally all the time. It therefore makes financial sense to train. So to wrap up this session, let's review what we need in a business case. We've discussed the options of people and technology and how they might mesh together. We've looked at 3 types of business strategy, and we've considered some of the key drivers for implementing training and development. This information now needs to be assembled in a report that explains why it's important for the business to train. You need to turn to your P&L to show the impact. Gross profit is affected by the turnover and also the cost of goods sold. So the lower the COGS, the more the gross profit is made. So turnover minus cost of goods equals gross profit. In many cases, the cost of goods is determined by your suppliers, so the training needs to be in the supplier firm in this case. Some firms, however, have people in COGS, particularly if they're a consultancy service. Well-trained people will be able to increase turnover because they'll be more effective. Turnover can then increase without the cost of goods increasing. In a lot of organisations, people are actually included in the operating costs. And as with gross profit, you can see the equation leading to net profit. Better trained people or increased technology can reduce operating costs. This then will increase the net profit. So using the P&L as a basis to develop your business case for training and development gives you the opportunity to show the financial impact on the business. And in many firms, training and development is just seen as a nice to have. It's not a nice to have, it's fundamental. And using the P&L to model the impact of training shows just how fundamental it is to the health and wealth of any business. So just to reiterate, there are 4 key benefits to training. 1, greater employee retention based on the feeling that the business is taking an interest in them and that they feel valued. 2, a reduction in recruitment costs replacing your good people who leave. 3, improved productivity because people have skills and competence to do their job. And the 4th is increased employee engagement because people see a career path and a long-term benefit of committing to that business. So, in a nutshell, that's what you need to think about when you're putting your business case together regarding training. So I'll hand back to John and see if we've got any questions.